thinking that was my computer making that sound. But well, good afternoon. Welcome to day 2 of Design Fundamentals. Today is a 1-hour lecture. We had our first meeting yesterday, if you can remember. We went over the syllabus, just did some basic stuff, and we're actually going to be starting lecture today. And then tomorrow is our 2-hour meeting, and remember that's virtual. So that will be over Zoom. You should have gotten that email inviting you to the Zoom meeting. So I will see you at 10:30 tomorrow morning to go over lab for that. I'm actually going to dim the lights. You're probably going to see my screen up there because I am recording this lecture for anyone who would need that. And then we're going to start talking about graphic design today. All right, dimming the lights helps you see the projector just a little bit more. So I actually want to spend some time talking about graphic design today and what is graphic design. And before we do that though, I actually want to spend a little bit of time talking about art. And is it art? And I feel like if we can maybe break that down, then we'll have a little bit easier time maybe breaking down what is graphic design. So before we begin, if you have your textbooks, let's go ahead and get those out. Just have them handy because we're going to need them. You can just leave them sit there though. If you don't have yours, that's okay. If your books haven't come in yet. So is it art? Would you consider this photograph to be art? I see some nods, shaking, yes. Brianna, why would you say this is art? It's a photograph, right? Somebody took it, and when they took the photograph, they made decisions about it, and yeah, I would definitely consider it art. How about this? Is this art? I see some head shaking yes again. Justin, why do you think this is art? Yeah, it's and I like that you use the word deliberate. Like that's a good word. Yeah, it was deliberate. Somebody deliberately made these decisions to take a pineapple and make a repeating pattern. Any guess into what software this could have been made in? I'm guessing Illustrator as well. Very good guess. So yeah, I would definitely consider that art. Is this art? Yes, it was somebody's Bitmoji. Sure. I would definitely consider that art. Again, probably made in Illustrator. I like that word deliberate. Like I'm thinking there's deliberate choices here. Is that art? Ah, okay. Well, let's break that down, Dylan. Dylan said it looks like a stock photo. What's a stock photo for anyone who may not know? Yeah. A stock photo is something you could purchase for use. So would you consider that art?
I mean, it technically started as a photograph, and so if we want to say one first picture, yes.
Yeah, I like that. It technically started as a photograph, and if we go with that logic, then yeah. Is that art? It's a logo, Starbucks. I would say it's art. I mean, again, going back to those deliberate choices and decisions in using software and things like that. Kind of the same thing, deliberate decisions, choices, creativity. Now we saw the stock image of the pineapple with a white background. Now here's kind of the same thing, only it's what we would call vectorized, created in Illustrator, and it's still art. If you're wondering about these icons around the photo, anyone know what this is for? They're watermarks, meaning what?
Basically, that's like a signature stamp. So instead of signing it, you can put a small image like one of those cameras or whatever on it.
It claims it copyrights it. So it pretty much makes it so no one can steal it and use it without that artist's permission. It's definitely art. It's got a watermark on it. You get that concept. It's a photograph, so we're gonna call that art, but like that's a beautiful photograph. So it really doesn't matter how beautiful the photograph or how ugly the photograph is, it's still art. Is that art? Let's say this is not a photograph. Like we're not just assessing the fact that somebody took a photo, the photo's art. Let's say you're in this environment. You're literally standing in front of the toothbrushes and you're the one that could take the photo. Would you consider what you see in front of you art? Yeah, you bet. Somebody made deliberate choices to put toothbrushes there. They were making something. It's no different than, Brianna, you said you like to weld, is that right? Or you did weld? Like, I see so many people making just beautiful things from welding, like welding art, that's a thing. Maybe toothbrush art is too. We already talked about a different pattern, kind of the same concept. Doesn't matter how beautiful and complex the pattern or how simple the pattern, it's still art. Still art. It's still art. Paintings, they're art. Whether we think it's good, tasteful, or not tasteful, it's still art. Our personal preference is not what makes it art, whether we like it or don't like it. It's art. Characters, animation, things that are created. Now, is that art? Okay, if we get back to explaining, well, somebody took a photograph and their photograph is there in art. Yeah. Again, as whether or not we like it or think it's gross or ew or how beautiful or not beautiful, the photograph itself is a piece of art. Now, my guess is, though, there's more purpose to this photograph other than its intention. Now, so that's the other key here. Now we start to throw in what is its intention. Personally, I don't necessarily believe the intention of this photograph is to be art. My guess is it's some form of documentation. And so now we start to get into the slippery slope, right? Art. That one may not be, that one might be, although related, art. Stop sign. This is digitized. Somebody created this in a piece of software. It's art. Whether it's functional, but it's still art. Now, this one's an easy one. I'm sure, of course, that's art. You can definitely see the creativity behind that, the storytelling, and things like that. So this is a photograph of a stop sign. The photograph itself is art. And we can then go back to intention. Out of curiosity, okay, we talked about this intention, maybe it's more for documentation. Do you think this intention is more for documentation or art?
It could be either.
Okay, explain.
So for a while, I worked at the Crawford County Communication Center as a dispatcher.
Okay.
And so we would occasionally have to inform officers of anything that may have been damaged, any sort of infrastructure or whatever, signs included.
Yeah.
So it could have been taken as a documentation sort of thing for some sort of reporting of some kind.
Absolutely.
Or on the other side of it, it could just be that the photographer decided they wanted to take a picture of the field and the stop sign was just in their way, they just didn't.
So I absolutely agree with that. I think it could be both ways. I think you could argue that it's more documentation. Maybe an accident occurred there and they need to document its location or whatever. Or maybe the sign was damaged and they need to document that vandalism. But then I could also see the art side of things. Yes, maybe the photographer loved the beautiful landscape and the stop sign was an oversight. But I kind of look at it too and think, well, the stop sign's pretty creatively placed. There's something in photography called a rule of thirds, and it is in the rule of thirds, and my guess is that's deliberate with how it's being placed and therefore makes it art. Now, what's interesting about this that I want to bring into when we're discussing art, so we've kind of talked about those deliberate choices. We've talked about intention. The other thing I kind of want to mention when it comes to us discussing whether or not this is art is it's not necessarily its purpose, but I'm trying to think what I lost my train of thought where I wanted to go with that. We talked about function, we talked about intention. I'm going to come back to it because I lost my train of thought on the other thing I wanted to kind of discuss with that one. Sorry. It's the mask. It's sucking my oxygen from my brain. Okay, how about this one?
I mean, yes and no. Another one of those ones. I mean, it could be a photo of, it could be a photo used for like a news article or some sort of magazine article.
Journalism. Yeah, you reminded me what I wanted to mention about this one. It's perception. Now it's based on your own individual perception. We can disagree on whether or not this is art. I might perceive it to be art because of rule of thirds. I might perceive this to be art because of how things are placed, and somebody else might not perceive that to be art because it's trash. Trash can be art, yes, but I don't know if this was deliberately placed. This was just placed to get rid of, and someone might have that argument. So where I'm going with these two is more or less that we may not agree on things. When it really comes down to it, and being a graphic designer, it's your argument, it's your storytelling. You need to know what it is you want to accomplish, what story you want to tell, what message you want to communicate, and you need to be deliberate about your choices so the message is received on the other end. And then you also have to understand is that not everyone's going to agree with it. It's very subjective. There's a lot of perception that comes into that and how we perceive things to be true, not true. We like them, we don't like them. There's environmental factors that go into those decisions. And we're all unique and individuals, and that plays a role in that too. Is this the one we started with? Art. So now that we're kind of talking about art and all those things that play into that, so hopefully have a little bit of understanding of what is art. I think there's deliberate choices behind it. I think there's creativity behind it. I think it involves a person behind the scenes making those decisions on where things are placed and how things are done and what colors are chosen and how to compose the photo. So then what's a graphic designer? And is that different from art? Yeah, I would say it is too. I should rephrase that because I said what's a graphic designer? Okay, that means that's a person. So what's graphic design? And how is that different than art? Yeah, yeah.
Categorized for graphic web is putting well, the internet itself is its own mind.
Yep, yeah, it is. Yep.
Graphic and they're together combines two.
Yeah, I think it does too. We could go back through these pictures and say, okay, it might be art, but is it graphic design? I would say this is graphic design because we mentioned Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever piece of software would have been required. Digitally created, right? Digitally created. That's graphic design. So how do photographs work? Is that graphic design? That one gets a little tricky again. We could say possibly I could be the graphic designer who's running the camera, and maybe I plan to use this image in my design. Is the image itself graphic design, or is the art that I put it in? So you can see how that one, it gets a little muddy. Absolutely graphic design. Absolutely graphic design. This is definitely graphic design. That's an Illustrator. You're using the pen tool and the shape tool and you're applying colors. Kind of goes back to the other photographs. I would like to say this is more photography and this is a photographer. And I think that's where it fits more instead of saying graphic design. However, graphic design may use this in its compositions. Like if I'm doing a magazine layout, that's in it. It's more of an element for graphic design, if that makes sense. Probably not graphic design, not unless I'm photographing it for something, but that in itself is art. It's in real life. Graphic design is more two-dimensional. This is real life. Graphic design can be three-dimensional. Yes, that's graphic design. That is graphic design. Kind of goes back to that photography thing. That's just kind of real life photograph. Now, how about this one? Is this graphic design? Because this is kind of a, well, it depends.
It could be, it also couldn't be.
When would it make it graphic design?
If all of the strokes and everything that you see on it, like it's clearly oil-based paint.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of different software programs you can use where you use an oil paint brush.
Absolutely.
And that would create the digitized
Yep.
version of that.
Yep.
So if it was created digitally, then yes, it would be graphic design.
Yes.
But physically, it would be.
Agreed. If I pulled out my canvas and my oil paints and my oil brush and I did this right here in real life, it's not graphic design, it's painting. However, if I opened up Photoshop and used my brushes in Photoshop, which you can do, and I recreated this digitally in Photoshop or any other digital software, I could consider that then graphic design then. Because I can, the other neat thing about that is that oil painting, like once that's my one physical piece. This, once I do it once, I could reproduce and do all sorts of different things with. So I can reproduce graphic design pretty quickly and pretty easily. Things in the physical world, I can't. There's a lot more work that's involved in that, which also makes those paintings and such worth more value because of how much goes into that, and you can't reproduce those very easily. Okay, so I think you get the idea. In your book, it gives you a definition for graphic design. I'd like to open that up and look at that definition. It is on page 4. I will do my best to bring that up on the screen, hopefully without affecting my recording. Unfortunately, though, I can't bring what's in the book on my screen for the recording for anyone who would be watching it that way. Let's see if I can get this any better. Light. Graphic design is the art. It's the art. We talked about art. It's the art of arranging pictographic and typographic elements to create effective communication. It's really similar to art then, right? I mean, isn't art doing the same thing? Art is a part of arranging things to create effective communication. The only part that's different is it may not be arranging pictographic and typographic elements. It's just more or less arranging elements. That's the difference. That's the book's definition. Go ahead and Google, what is graphic design? Did any family members ask you when you said, I'm going to school for graphic design? Was anyone like, what is that? Or what can you do with that? Right? It's very much a like, man, it's really hard to explain. And I'll get students that ask me too, like, so what is graphic design? I'll get high school students that ask me that, or I'll get parents. Or what kind of jobs do you get with that? It's so hard to explain for someone to understand. And hopefully I'm going to try and do a little bit better here when you leave, that you have a little stronger understanding of what is graphic design. So let's see, what results do we get when we search what is graphic design? Does anyone want to share one of their results?
Graphic design process and visual communication, problem solving through the use of typography, iconography, and illustration. It is a subset of visual communication.
There's some words. Visual communication. Change my background for a second here in my Zoom window. Can't see me writing, but you at least get a little bit of it. So visual communication, here's the first few words of that again.
Constant visual communication and problem solving through the use of typography.
That's good. Felt like there was another word you said in the first sentence, but maybe not.
Well, visual communication and problem solving.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Who else has one they can read to me? A definition of graphic design. Anyone else have one that was different than that plan? Tim? Another communicate. I like how they use the word professionals. Like that. Professionally created. Okay. Who has another one? Any others? Because you read this one, I think, right? Dylan,
Yeah,
the one from is the process.
Yeah, it's like a big square on the right side of the screen.
Yep. I'm going to read the books again. It's still up on the board. Graphic design is the art of arranging pictographic and typographic elements to create effective communication. I like that. Effective. So even in defining graphic design, we can't agree, right? It's pretty complex trying to even define it. I have a couple videos on it too. Let's see if that clears things up any better. I'll have to start this video over, but because you don't see it. Okay. I'm going to break this down as a graphic designer. I think this video moves too fast. Obviously, when it was created, the creator knows what it says, and so their brain's able to process it. But you are going to find that there's going to be a couple slides that either you don't get to read all of it, the slide's not there long enough. That's actually something that's a problem with animation, and you're going to see that probably in your second year. When you do things, it's going to be a comment I talked to you about. Things move too fast. So something you're going to start realizing now is you're going to assess everything. And that's part of being a graphic designer. And that's okay. But I think what's not okay is to just say, I don't like it, and or to belittle somebody else's work. That's not okay. And I'm not doing that at all. I think what's done here is fantastic. It has a great message. I just wish it was a little bit slower so we could process it a little bit better. So just be a little bit cautious when you are kind of analyzing some of that work, because you never know who created it, and you'd hate to offend that creator unintentionally. And let's see if I can get volume for you. All right, let's try this again. So there's no words, I don't think. You're just going to have to try and read everything. Kind of fast, right? In a couple spots. Oh, I'm gonna pause this. Combine art and technology to communicate ideas through image. I kind of like that. That's it's using some words up there again. We have the word communicate, or the idea of communicating there. Where we're using the word art again. I like adding the word technology because I feel like that is a big part of what makes it graphic design. Hey, I think so. Did everyone get a mask here? Second years did not, but somebody came to the room yesterday to make sure that they got masks. I think so. I think so. As long as, you know, you might hit a person who wasn't in that class at that time, but I think we're good. Thank you. Even when we start talking about graphic design, right now we're just trying to define graphic design. Once we can get that done, now it's just going to even get more complicated after that, because then we go into, okay, well, you can get into this specialty in graphic design. You can get into like this specialty of packaging. You can get into this specialty of advertising. You can get into this specialty of marketing and promotion. That's why it's so hard to define and answer what kind of jobs do you get, because look at all the different things a graphic designer can do. I mean, they can be part of developing video games. They can be into photography. They can create web. They can create the designs that go on the sides of cars. It could be the person that helps make like photo ID cards. I mean, it can be as wonderful and elaborate and like amazing to the most dull, boring job on the planet. I mean, the sky's the limit, really, when it comes to it. And that's what makes it really, really hard. It kind of depends on the individual, your motivation, and what do you want to do? Because the sky really is the limit. It can take you to so many different places. If you're trying to communicate a product or concept in a visual way, then you'll be using graphic design to get your message across. This is kind of my favorite, that's my favorite thing. And that's what I like to use to explain to people what is graphic design. Because one thing I usually say, like, well, it's pretty much everywhere. anytime you're trying to communicate a product or a concept in a visual way, whether it's on a t-shirt, a logo on a folder, a billboard, a design on the side of a car, the design on the EMS ambulance, as long as you're trying to show something visually, you'll be using a graphic designer to get that message across. The sky's the limit. I did have a student once design Fenimore's EMS. So when you see Fenimore's EMS, that was designed by a student when she was a student. It's the purple, kind of the maroon gold one. I'll have to see if I can find her mock-up of it, but all of that would involve a graphic designer. So if it's something that is communicating a product or a message or a service visually, it involves a graphic designer. Think of the word visually. Almost everything is visually. Like I'm even looking at your sweatshirts. A graphic designer would be involved in that, developing the pattern, putting it on there, the content. That's visual. Think of the packages of products you buy. That's a graphic designer. That's visual. The cover on my textbook, that's a graphic designer. That's visual. This right here, that's a graphic designer. That's visual. Getting excited. This right here, that's a graphic designer. That's visual. That graphic right there, that's a graphic designer. That's visual. Your pencil case, the pattern on the pencil case here, that's a graphic designer. That's visual. The sky's the limit. Or you can go as something as boring as the wrapper on this water bottle. It is a graphic designer. So I think that's a good way to explain it. All around you. It's about problem solving visually. Everything is solving a problem when it comes to graphic design. It's a giant problem. So a client calls you up and says they want a t-shirt. All right, that's the problem. They want a t-shirt. Because now it's, what do you want on it? What do you want it to look like? What colors? What font? What's the concept? What's the message? And so it's always solving one giant problem visually. They work in fields such as branding and packaging and publishing and advertising and digital design. There's so many different fields of graphic design. More than likely, you're not working in all of them. You're probably specializing in one of them. You use text, illustrations, symbols, photography, textures. I didn't catch the last word. And they're kind of covering up. It's about communication. I wish I could read what's underneath that. Is there a way to get rid of these things that pop up? I know.
Or
You.
like I don't know, flipping the screen above the bottom.
No, it's like that is really affecting the message, isn't it? But you can see it's going to say you're using computer software. Again, you got the word create. You're always creating something, art, communicating. Just those are all different ways to describe what is graphic design. Good little video. I also want to watch just a little bit of his concept. We're not going to watch the whole thing, so it's like 6 minutes, but just a little bit of it, because he's going to kind of share some things as well about graphic design.
This series is for anyone together. So if you're interested in graphic design, consider becoming a graphic designer. Join me as I discuss a series of graphic design topics. So you're interested in graphic design, perhaps considering becoming a graphic designer and looking to learn more. In this video, I'm going to discuss what graphic design is. Now, a lot of people on my channel have asked me this question, mainly youngsters and people who are thinking about pursuing graphic design, want to know what graphic design is and if it's meant for them. Now, I have often found this a really hard question, as it does not really have a simple answer without a scientific explanation. Now, if you Google this, it will tell you that graphic design is the art or skill of combining text and pictures, advertisements, magazines, or books. So quite a simple and accurate explanation there. Though I happen to think there's more to it than that. In this video, I'm going to attempt to answer this question and give you my take on it from my experience. So what is graphic design? Well, let's start simple. So with graphic design, we have two things. We have graphic and design. Graphic is visual, which is associated with art, imagination, and expression, involving many mediums such as drawing, painting, graving, or lettering in clear and explicit detail. So the graphic part of graphic design is made up of visual elements, the building blocks of design. The basic visual elements are combined to bring graphic design into the following: line, color, shape, texture, space, form, and typography.
We'll be learning about
So
those.
of our artistic expression, we choose these visual elements and bring them on surface in a layout to convey an idea. And the second part is design, which is to decide upon the look, function of something before it is made.
I like that he's breaking this down into 2 words, and I thought that was a neat way to do it. So he's saying graphic is like your imagery part. That's your visual part. That's when we get all these visuals in the definition, that's where we're getting from the word graphic. And I feel like the graphic part is more factual, right? Like it's a visual, it's a picture, it's line, it's color, it's shape. That's what's making the graphic part. Design is where the subjectivity comes in, right? Where you decide upon the look and the function of something before it's made. This is where the creativity happens. This is what's going to make you a good graphic designer or a not so good graphic designer, are your decisions. And how do you start making better decisions? That's what we're going to start learning about tomorrow. We're going to start learning about the principles of design so that you can make good layout decisions that are effective and professional and look creative and communicate your message successfully. So the only thing I really want you to walk away with on this is that there will be a test question that pretty much asks you the definition of graphic design. And I'm not going to try and trip you up. It's probably going to pull the one from the book. So you need to understand that it is an art of arranging pictographic and typographic elements to form visual communication. But I also want you to understand it's just not that simple either. It's a complex definition that really just requires a degree of understanding and realizing what that is. And hopefully these videos kind of showed you a little bit more of why that's so. And maybe just that it's pretty much everything around you that you see visually that someone would have had to have made. Any other questions on what is graphic design? Ah.
Like, I know.
Yeah, okay.
Say you're really good at art, but it's like.
Good question. So let me see if I hear you right. To be a good professional graphic designer, do you necessarily have to be, is it a natural talent or can it be taught? Are you kind of asking that too?
A little bit of both.
Okay, here's my thought to that. I think to be a successful graphic designer, obviously, I think it can be taught, right? Because I can teach you the principles. I can teach you everything that you need to know to be a graphic designer. I think what separates students from being really good graphic designers to those that are just okay is really your level of interest. So if you have passion, my boss once said to somebody else, because they misinterpreted my actions, as, I guess I don't really remember the full story, but he kind of was like, you got to remember, Katie's an artist, she's a designer, so she's passionate. Like, you have to have passion for what you're doing. And I think if you can have passion and if you're really excited about what you're doing, that's really the key difference. Because then you're going to have the willingness to learn. You're going to be that person that has that thirst for knowledge. You're going to have a little bit of that competitive nature where you see that something that somebody else is doing and you want to do it too, just as good, and you're going to work hard to make it good. That's kind of the difference, is the work ethic. Does having a little bit of a natural gift help? Of course. But I have seen students who have a natural gift and a God-given talent to do this and not be as successful simply because they don't have the passion or the work ethic. And so that's the difference, having a really good work ethic and a really good passion, because it is a super competitive industry. You can't fake it. You can't fake being a good designer, because the proof's in the pudding. They're going to look at your work that you've created throughout the years, and either A, it's good, or B, it's not. And so my job here is to really give you those tools to make it good. If you've heard the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. That's kind of my role. You're the horse, and I'm the person that has led you to water. It is really up to you to drink it. And if you drink it, I think you're going to be successful. And by drinking it, I mean that you soak in the knowledge and you use it, you turn the homework in, and you work hard. That's the key difference. Good question. Which I think is an excellent turning point into finishing off the class by reading this one extra paragraph out of your book. If I can take my projector back to that. So we just read the definition of graphic design. Graphic design is the art of arranging pictographic and typographic elements to create effective communication. I want you to keep reading the rest of that paragraph. Let that sink in. It is a complex discipline that requires skillful and sensitive use of the eyes for navigating, the hands for crafting, the left brain for analytical reasoning and logic, and the right brain for creative, intuitive thinking. Directing those functions of the mind and body is a demanding human activity. In fact, research in higher education ranks studying visual arts second behind medical school in its overall demand of the learner. Design is not a collection of formulas. that, if followed and applied, ensures effective results. Design is a fluid process that is guided by the designer's sense of intuition, reason, and aesthetic judgment. I can't teach intuition. Some of that is just given to you. However, you can grow your intuition by looking at designs, critiquing your classmates' work, showing up to class, participating in lectures, realizing what makes good design, what makes bad design. You can grow your intuition, and that's where the difference is going to happen. And it comes back to what you put into it. What do you think about that? In fact, research in higher education ranks studying visual arts second behind medical school in its overall demand of the learner. Raise your hand if that surprises you. Yeah, right? Some of you may not be here tomorrow. No, no kidding. And they're only saying that because of what it's asking your brain. You know, most professions, it's really one side of the brain or the other that you're really, really using. And what they're saying is, this one is like it's a whole body. You got to use your whole body. You need to use your left brain for all the logic, analytical thinking, problem solving. Photoshop's not working. What can I try? I got to try this, this, and this. Then you got to use your right. Then all of a sudden you got to switch over to your right brain and be like, ooh, I got to be creative now. And then you got to use your eyes for catching mistakes and looking for things that are out of place and don't fit quite right. And you're navigating and you're using your hands probably to create and mold, and you might be sketching and drawing and trying to do that. It's exhausting. But if you have passion, you'll love every minute of it. And you won't work a day in your life. So that's graphic design in a nutshell. You may walk out of here today more confused than when you walked in. But if anything, hopefully you walked out a little bit more inspired than when you walked in to really want to put 110% into this, because you'll get out what you put in. Tomorrow I'm going to see you at 10:30, and you're going to start learning about the principles of design. In fact, I think I printed off a sheet that I want to give you. So hang out for a second. I'm going to run and grab those. And we're going to do a couple activities as we practiced on yesterday getting into Zoom. So just make sure you kind of sign on. You don't have to sign on very early. I'll probably sign on maybe like 5 minutes early or so. So just as long as you sign on by 10:30, which is the start time, because I'll get started on time. Other than that, hang out for portfolio. I know it's virtual, but I want to just get you orientated today to the online version of portfolio. And then after today, you can decide if you still want to hang around when we have portfolio class, or if you'd rather get your work done a different time and leave. But hang around for today, and we'll talk about portfolio starting at 1:30.